Hello, everyone. We're going to discuss message groups in Slate today through our Slate demo series. Thanks for joining us again. You may have seen me on some of these before, and good to have you back. My name is Nick Porcella. I'm the senior Slate training strategist with Carnegie. Been with the team 2.5 years at this point. Before that, I was a high school teacher, an admissions recruiter and counselor, and I also marketed for college. If you are following along at home with our Carnegie archetypes, mine are pink, green, maroon, and I am the industrious and meticulous philosopher. So let's dive in. And today's goal, simply stated, is we're going to learn an easy way to allow your audience to control which communications they receive, and most importantly, discourage the dreaded universal unsubscribe. Our agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to dive into a test environment shortly to tackle these three questions. What are message groups in Slate? How do you create them? And what are some best practices and maybe a pitfall or two along the way? So it is simply stated. Let's now dive in and head over to our instance. Message groups themselves. Let's talk about this as a definition. Like, what is a message group? Well, the background here, and this comes directly from the knowledge base, by default and by law, that point is important, more on that soon. By default, all email communications coming out of Slate have an unsubscribe link. We've all seen it, and we've seen it even beyond Slate. If anyone subscribes to anything these days, you've gotten an email where you have the chance to unsubscribe. I would hope, at least. When the recipient clicks the link, now back in Slate, they're typically directed to a landing page where they can complete a form. And the native functionality in Slate is that would unsubscribe them from all non-transactional mailings. So that is the native feature. Our work today is going to be the nice to have, or the optimization side, the next step, if you will. Message groups allow you to create categories, essentially. And this does a few things. This empowers people to stay engaged. For one, it would discourage that universal opt-out. Somebody would be given a choice to say, I would like to opt out of all emails or these specific set of emails. And that really just gives you a way to keep people getting items from your institution in communications. Instead of opting out of everything, maybe they opt out of arts or athletics or your departments. We see this a lot across industries. I know for me, as a proud cat dad of three beautiful cats, my local pet store sends me lots of emails. And at one point, there was too many. So I wanted to opt out. I clicked the little link, and they had their groups built out. I presume they're not using Slate, but if we're going to apples language compare, and the ability to opt into emails about cats versus dogs versus fish versus birds, that helped me immensely. I was interested in cat content, but not fish content. No offense to fish. So I was able to pick and choose. And that is essentially what's going on here, but now back in that higher ed sphere, allowing students to select what they want to hear from. So how do we do this? How do we approach this in Slate? You can see I'm already in message groups as sort of a backdrop to set us up. The way this is accessed is very easy. It's done through database, and it's just called message groups. The page is pretty simple. The very first step I recommend, and this is probably half the battle, is creating your list. Which groups do you want students to have the ability to stay in or opt out of? As a default in your database, you just get this second one you see here is the allow unsubscribe default, so that when somebody goes in and they're building mailings as their deliver person, you at the very beginning would see allow unsubscribe, and then you would also see no unsubscribe. We'll talk about the nuances there shortly. But what we're seeking to do is demonstrate how you would build out these other opt-out message groups. These are their categories that would give people more choice in terms of what they're opting out of. So as I said, the first thing is developing your list. Best practice, what we see institutions doing well is start with one and work your way up. We would say that in general, 3 to 5 or so message groups is a good number to have. 10, 20 is way too many. That gets overwhelming. And the reason we're here is the one's not enough. That would allow somebody to just simply opt out of everything. Some examples I usually see working well for institutions, especially as they're beginning this journey: athletics versus marketing, admissions, the arts, financial aid. For example, if you're emailing students and one of your recipients is really interested in your athletic programs, but maybe not as much in the arts, they could use message groups and indicate that. Similarly, if somebody is really interested in hearing from your admissions office, but they don't really want any marketing emails, they'd have a way to do that through your message groups. So this is very easy to implement. You would just click Insert in order to begin this process. Now, I already have one started, so like any good cooking show, I will show you the same process now, sort of halfway in, if you will. So we get the pop-up Edit Recorded Message Groups. You'll want to keep this as active. You can elect to folder it. But there's two items here that we'll discuss first: name and unsubscribe group. The name you can think of as an internal name. So as long as this works for you administratively, it can be whatever you'd like it to be. That's going to differ from the unsubscribe group, which is what your audience will see. I find a lot of the times these are similar, if not the same. In this case, it will be for our test. But remember that unsubscribe group is going to be external. And we'll show you what that looks like in a deliver mailing. You've probably seen it actually many times. Now, the probably most important piece here is, at least legally, is the unsubscribe organization. You do have to put in your organization name as well as an address. Now, Slate says that this is typically included. I'll go a step further and say you need to include this. We'll talk about why very shortly. But for now, just know name is internal, unsubscribe group is external, and your organization should include your actual name of your organization as well as the physical address. If you wanted to supply a message, you could do that here. You could say, we're sorry to see you go. Here are some choices, so and so. And then in some future version of our Slate demo series, we'll talk about custom unsubscribe forms. For the sake of time today, and to keep this video concise, we won't have time to dive into that, but there is a way to create custom unsubscribe forms. So this gives us what we need for now. And now you've done most of the work. And you can see it's not particularly hard. It's not particularly time consuming. What you would do now is you would go back to your deliver module. You would create your mailing. And you'd have the option now for your opt-out group. You can fill in all your other parameters as you want. I'm also going to add a template. We'll skip the steps of your recipient list and actually sending, because this is less geared towards a deliver training in general and more towards message groups. But you'll see that if you scroll down, this now lives here at the bottom. And yes, there is the default that will always show here, but that is just the default. This is where you are able to create your custom unsubscribe. Now, we are in a test environment, so I'm not going to click this because it won't show up. But this is going to give me something very specific. It's going to give me the organization name, the address, so that I'm complying with US law. The unsubscribe link will take me to that page, and it gives me the name of that group. If I had started with the default here, this would be the default organization. Now, I had already coded this because, again, we're interested in complying with US law to include the address, but the default is to not include the address. So this is very important to have. But as you can see, very simple. It can be very effective because you get that custom unsubscribe page. So now a couple of additional best practices, a couple of words of caution. Another best practice to consider is, in general, the defaults, the allow unsubscribe and the no unsubscribe. So the allow unsubscribe is really, it is the default, as it indicates. And as you're building out your database for the first time, a lot of your messages will have this. This essentially just gives you the standard functionality of Slate to opt somebody out, but it is universal. That's probably most of your messages. There absolutely is a time and a place for this no unsubscribe option, and it indicates as such, transactional mailings only. And for this, I would say one example probably illustrates any of the examples you could think of. Simply stated, if somebody submits an application, they're going to need some sort of feedback that it was submitted successfully, that you received it. So that might be the case where you use this no unsubscribe option. It's a transactional mailing. Somebody would be expecting confirmation, even if they were opted out of your other emails. So those are our two uses here. And then all of the other ones that have been added here allow for that nuance. Finally, I think it would be important to mention some best practices and pitfalls when considering this through the legal lens. Now, I will say I am not an attorney. I can't speak to every institution, and this is really geared more towards the US now. So I would say talk to your legal team to see how this may differ in your country, in your state, in your city. But in general, folks in the US can expect that this is all governed by the Federal Trade Commission, specifically the Can-Spam Act. I actually find that this article is really interesting. It's pretty digestible. It may not be a beach read, but I do recommend taking a look through it or having someone on your team do that. We're not going to review everything here, but points 4 and 5 are particularly relevant to our conversation today. Point 4, tell recipients where you're located. This goes back to what I mentioned of providing that physical address. So Slate says typically includes, I wish it were a little bit more strongly worded, you need to include it. The fine these days for not can be in excess of $50,000 per occurrence. So this is an easy way to get into compliance with a part of the Can-Spam is add your physical address. The fifth point here is also one that's relevant to us today. Tell recipients how to opt out of receiving future marketing email from you. And that makes sense. And I like to place this in terms of the golden rule that we all learned in elementary school is, we all want to be treated this way. When you receive emails that are marketing in nature, you don't want all of them. You want the ability to opt out. So think of this in terms of putting yourself in the seat of your audience and giving people a clear and easy way to opt out. Slate does a lot with this natively, but just keeping in mind that this should be readily available and you should always use this when you have a mass marketing communication. So in general, in summary, again, I'm not an attorney, consult your legal team. In general, you can expect that as long as you are giving a clear way to opt out in your non-transactional mailings and you provide your physical address, that should comply with Can-Spam and get you well on your way. Definitely take a look through with your legal team to be sure that you're meeting all of those guidelines. So that takes us to the end for today. As I mentioned, I do hope in the future that we can talk more about custom unsubscribe pages. These are a really great way to get even further nuance in this conversation. But what I will say for now is appreciate your time, first and foremost. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to reach out to us at carnegiehighered.com. We'd always love to chat and talk about partnering in Slate. Again, my name is Nick Porcella, and appreciate your time. Take care.